Still have people trickling in. Yay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, perfect. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started today. Welcome back to our Foundational Concepts of Youth Engagement webinar series. This is session number 2. The title of this session is going to be Taking a Step Back to Move Forward. And just to really provide a little bit of reflection on last session, we did really talk about a lot of big concepts about the if we're talking about like the root causes of oppression, especially when we're talking about the experience of young people. We talked about youth as being community partners and being the solution, not the problem, to a lot of the situations that are happening within their community. So we really wanted to start with that so that we can have that as a baseline, especially when we're talking about how we view young people in our spaces, in our communities as well. But just kind of want to put it out there and reiterate a lot of the, I guess, intentions behind this webinar series that we came up with as a team, right? We want to make sure that we understand that all of these sessions, they are really in place to begin the conversation. There is, we could go on forever about some of these concepts. There's so much information and knowledge to really delve into and best practices, but this is just the start of a conversation. So we can really sort of build on that language and use a lot of these this knowledge and these resources that we're sharing to help advocate for the cause that we are voicing, right? To bring more youth into our spaces and to expand the space where youth can be leaders in our communities. And then beyond that, another thing that is a big intention is really to come together with, all of us in this space, how we are passionate about working with youth, or maybe we're curious, or maybe we're not there yet. We don't really have the full understanding, but we're in this space regardless, right? So how can we come together as a community, as a network, to be able to share our experiences, to pull from one another's knowledge? That's really what this is about as well. So with that being said, I will go ahead and move forward. Okay, so I just want to give acknowledgments right from the beginning. This whole series has been a collaboration. So this is a collective effort from me coming from California Youth Advocacy Network. My name is Ignacio Burgos, for anyone that does not know me. And then we also have Ravina from the Tribal Community Coordinating Center, and also Kale from LGBTQ Center in Orange County. And just, right off the bat, I always tell them how grateful I am for their contributions and coming into this space. But just want to say that out loud again. Very grateful to have them working with me in the space to create this, because really pulling from each of our knowledges, each of our experiences, because that matters. And I think I want to also express how we are, in the topic that we're going to be talking about today, with like collective power, transformative power, how power can be utilized in a positive manner, how we are modeling that by sharing the space, sharing the conversation, and having that collective discussion from different perspectives and different experiences and different scope of works. However, we have a uniting passion, and that is making sure that we are working towards the betterment and the empowerment of young people. And I always hate using empowerment for young people, because I do believe young people are already, they have power, right? They have the capacity, they have the abilities. But yeah, just putting that out there. All right. So I will continue. Right from the beginning, the first question we want to put out there, and we want to pull from you, about the definition of power. I want to know what your understanding of power is before we really take a deep dive into some of these topics and really expand on this topic. But yeah, so you can put this in the chat. I would love if anyone feels called to speak out, unmute yourself. You can build a conversation over the mic. But the question is, what does power mean to you? How does it show up in your space? Has been your experience with that term power, or the practice of power? Ooh, thank you, Rachel. Right off the bat, to lead by example. Joshua, you said knowledge is power. Oh, yes. I'm a big believer of that as well. So power, it can show up through our knowledge, through leadership. I'll give some time for it. Yep. For more people to kind of populate this discussion. Oh, thank you, Tammy. Resistance to oppression. I like that as well. Right, Anna, you said our passion, and that very much so can be a source of power. I like that. And yes, being able to influence decisions. So I like that as well as a definition of power, our ability to really have momentum and make changes and have other people sort of make decisions around the power that we have. All right, listening is power. I like that too, building our capacity of understanding. And that kind of can fall into that idea of too of power being knowledge, because that's community knowledge, people knowledge, coming from the experiences that we pull from the community members. All right, and thank you, Nancy. We see the capacity or ability to influence the behavior of others. Absolutely. All right, and as always, just just like in the first session that we had when we were going over, the idea of advocacy. What does advocacy mean? There's not really going to be only one definition. We can have a consensus around a general definition, but everyone is going to have their own unique experiences around power and the meaning of power and how power shows up in their space. But I'm going to pull on from a quote here from a speech from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this was from his speech. And you can, if you want to read the whole thing, it's where do we go from here? But I do feel like this was a really great way to define power, right, from his perspective and from his experiences. And he said that power, properly understood, is nothing but the ability to achieve purpose, right? And that pulls on where we were talking about power having sort of knowledge, influence of making decisions, and also of leadership as well, and passion, right? Because that's where purpose lies. It is the strength required to bring about social, political, and economic change. And something I want to pull from and expand on, I have it highlighted there so I didn't forget, that word strength. And someone said the resistance to oppression, right? So one way that we can even understand strength is being the capacity of an object or the substance to withstand great force or pressure. I want us to keep that in our head. So understanding strength is not necessarily, like how powerful we are, how hard we punch, how much like sway we have. It can mean momentum, and again, it can mean resistance to oppression, as someone said earlier as well when we're talking about power. All right, and then with that, I'll go ahead and pass it on to Ravina.
Are we heading into the activity?
Oh yeah. Do you want me to segue? You want me to transition a little?
Yeah, I thought I was coming on after the activity, but
yeah, that's right.
I can take us in.
No, I'll transition this. Sorry.
Okay.
So speaking of power, we're going to be as I said, coming from everyone's own experience with power. We're going to have a bit of conversation. We're going to break out into discussions, doing breakout rooms, and just a fair warning for everyone, us facilitators, we're going to be joining as well, really to make sure that we also are modeling this conversation and being a part of this discussion too. So what we're going to do, we're going to, in our breakout rooms, I'm going to plug in these questions. Boom, 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 boom. Here we go. I'm going to copy and paste. So one if you can, if you have a scratch piece of paper or scrap piece of paper and a pencil or pen, by all means, you can, there we go. You can draw the answer to this. It doesn't always have to be in words, or if you want to just really process this information with a story, that's fine too. Just at the end, we're going to have some time to reflect on our answers and really apply it to some of the more information that we're going to go over. So just in your conversations, make sure that you kind of do have some understanding and sort of your experience prepared and ready to share if you feel called to share. So the first question is, what made you feel powerless? All right, so having not having power, not having the ability to really feel like you could change your environment, or that you did experience some form of oppression, or sort of the removal of your voice. So what made you feel powerless, and how was power used to control your life or suppress your voice? All right, so we want to see one side of that powerlessness, but also we'd also love to hear what made you feel powerful and why, and how did you use your power individually or with others to enhance your life, make your voice heard, or change the situation. Again, we're pulling from our own experiences around how we've been impacted by power, or how we've utilized power in our spaces. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get into breakout rooms. Hey, okay. Hope that went well for everyone. I hope everyone had time to really get to hear from one another in the space. And also, shout out to Amanda. Thank you. I'm glad that we had you in the main room, because I was seeing like, this person's coming in. It's like, you were able to get people into the rooms and keep the conversation going so fluidly. So appreciate that. All right. And now, Ravina, I will pass the torch.
Okay, I'm ready now. Okay, so yeah, I hope that everyone had a good conversation. I know we did in our room. And the purpose of that activity was really to explore our own experiences with power. Hopefully you had the opportunity to reflect on moments when you felt both powerful and powerless. And it's likely that many of us encounter these dynamics on a daily basis. I know I do. We talked about that a little bit, how it just shows up constantly. And so there are a lot of little examples, but then there are certain situations that are really more impactful, more profound, that have more significant consequences, that we were really trying to reflect on those and explore those experiences and really think about how they impact us in so many different ways: physically, psychologically, emotionally. And so we definitely want to discuss this as a bigger group, but we really want to identify some key concepts to guide that conversation first. So these aren't new concepts because we've, again, all experienced them, but we wanted to define them for the sake of focusing the discussion and providing that language to identify them. And the first concept is power over. So having power over someone else refers to a dynamic between groups or individuals where one exerts more control or that excessive influence or authority over another group or another individual. One person will have that unequal share of the power, and naturally that means that the other has less, or they're just not on equal ground. This control can take many forms: physical, emotional, psychological, social. It can be age differences, differences in educational attainment or socioeconomic status, related to all different things, but it just really creates that imbalance. And it impacts our ability to make decisions, to set rules, to set boundaries, and to have that autonomy to guide our own decisions and our own outcomes for ourselves. It leads to those unequal relationships where one party dominates the other. So power over in interpersonal relationships can be extremely harmful for all these reasons. It's usually apparent for the individual that has the less power, but it really does a disservice to everyone involved. So it can hinder that open communication, that collaboration, create resentment. And these are not healthy or ideal conditions for anyone, regardless of what space they occupy in that balance of power. Healthy communication is really essential for all of us in any relationship, and those unequal dynamics inhibit that open and honest communication, leads to misunderstandings, and it damages trust between parties. And so it just really hinders our development. In more extreme cases, that power over can lead to patterns of manipulation and abuse. When someone becomes accustomed to another party having power over them, then they can be more accepting of emotional or verbal or physical, just unhealthy interactions, and be at a higher risk of experiencing that stress and that anxiety and all the other negative outcomes due to that pressure and that fear associated with those dynamics. Of course, it also leads to a decline in your self-esteem, your self-worth. We talked about that in our group, and how that impacts your other interactions throughout your life. If there's that criticism or that lack of autonomy, it can really erode your confidence and create a lot of self-doubt. So an unempowered person really tends to second guess their own judgment, less likely to advocate for themselves and to speak up. It's really important for individuals and groups to recognize and address those power imbalances so that they can have those healthy interactions and feel like they have control over their own outcomes. And so on the other end of that spectrum, we can strive for those more balanced dynamics that empower. And I will let Ignacio talk about that.
Right. And that other side of the spectrum, or really to expand on that practice of power, the use of power, and our vision of power, and that is transformative power. So where versus power over is having that power put upon someone without their consent. Transformative power is not trying to push out, exclude other people's voices. It is bringing in, it is opening up the space. But at the base of that transformative power, and this is why, to add to this, like transformative power as a positive, more positive spectrum of power, right, can be so contagious in that wonderful, beautiful, positive way, is because at the base of it is really the respect of oneself, right, and your values. So having that high self-esteem, but because of you having that safety and that ability to extend trust, to extend belief in others, you're opening up space for others to be able to bring in their ideas as well, their passions, their agendas, without feeling threatened, without feeling that, again, in that last bit, having that zero-sum mentality, to where, like, if this person is gaining, then I am losing, right? So we are trying to really put forward that idea of transform the power as, again, that collective power that we were talking about in the first presentation or first session. All right, but let's look at, especially referring to some of our discussions, right? When we look at the sources of transformative power, where does it come from? What are some ways that we can look at how transformative power shows up in our spaces, right? So we are expanding our perspective of power. So the first one is power within, and I already said that about one's self-worth, one's really, and that other part, self-knowledge, is so important. And that's why it's important to really educate people on, or get people to start talking about their identity, where they come from, their roots, their heritage, and really look at that as a value and beautify that, right? Because we all have our roots, and that can be a source of transformative power. Then there's power with. That is building community, trust with others, having those big visions, big goals that go beyond just ourself. Again, opening that space to include others into that vision. Then there's power two, which is the sense and capacity for someone to actually take action and speak about what they want in their life or for their life. And remember, as Ravina said, where that when someone does not have power two, when they don't have that sense of empowerment, they're less likely to speak up because they don't see the value in their voice. They don't see the value in their perspective, and they don't really consider themselves to be a I guess, merited contributor. But of course, they are enough, and any bit that they have from their experiences is absolutely invaluable and needs to be said, right? And then there's power forward. And this, especially in the beginning, when we were talking about that sense of passion is power. This is what that's about. So really having the belief and values that we have, like what are we doing this for? Why am I here? When you have a stronger understanding of that, when a community has a stronger understanding of that, because sometimes that power forward is not just individual. Sometimes it can be a collective power force. Sometimes it is very much so attached to your identity and your heritage and your culture, right? So again, having that as a source of transformative power can have very strong impacts as well. So the importance of that power forward, and focus on that last sentence, is because having that understanding, that is applying to our lens, how we view one another, how we view the processes in our life, how we make sense of the world and why things take place, why things happen, what's okay for me to allow and what's not. Okay, so all of that is surrounded in that source of power for. Okay, so all of these are just again expanding on the understanding of power, the sources of that transformative, that power, that positive form of power that we're talking about. And then again, uh, just kind of expressing the positive impacts when we start to take this approach and utilizing transformative power. One, right off of the bat, it is an alternative way of viewing that power versus that more toxic form of power, power over, where we're not having consent of others, where we're not bringing them into that space. Okay, transformative power allows for that, and it also allows for the space for equity and equality to take place. Okay, so it's bringing that into the space when we're talking about progression and movement forward. All right. I'll pass the baton again to Ravina.
Yeah, so now we just want to give everyone the opportunity as a group to really draw on what we did in the smaller breakout rooms and reflect on those different forms of power and how they have shown up in your own lives and in your different experiences. So feel free to add to the chat or to come off of mute and share different experiences with power over, where you felt powerless, as well as when you felt empowered.
And I can go first on this, and I'd love to hear other people's how they can relate, especially all those different definitions of transformative power to, especially some of those discussions that happened a moment ago. But something that I expressed and that came up in my group was really how working with young people was a powerful experience. How we kind of had it kind of led to an empowerment of ourselves. And speaking personally, especially with me having or experiencing oppression as a young person and being in those spaces where I felt powerless, being now in a space where I can share power with young people and really help them to dismantle some of those experiences and those power dynamics that I went through as a young person. That to me is powerful, but specifically with that transformative power, that is also my power for, right? That is my vision. That's why I do it. It's because I look at it as a part of community healing to undo a lot of those past experiences so that other young people and beyond just the young people I'm working with, hopefully my vision is to have it to where young people expansively, infinitely can be able to be empowered, have more capacity to speak up from their experiences and be able to really look at their knowledge and their experiences and value it. And again, look at it as a beautiful thing and look at it as a source of power.
I can share.
Yeah, thanks.
So my name is Kim, and during the pandemic, some young people organized a movement in the city that I live in, because they found out that one of our city council members is really racist. Like he said on video and everything that he was a proud racist. And so they organized this whole movement, and I feel like they got the whole city involved. And I felt really empowered. Like we spoke at city council, we protested outside of city council, and it was really awesome for them to start that. And I feel like they really empowered a lot of people, which was really cool. And the city council members would say things like, oh, these high schoolers, or oh, these young people don't know what they're talking about. So yeah, it was very interesting. And unfortunately he did, like the city council did nothing. Um so that was sad too, but at least I felt like they really spread the word, and a lot of people found out about this man who was on our city council.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly. Thank you for sharing that story. And I'm rooting for the young people you're working with. I'm glad to hear that they had that success with bringing that awareness, and I'm rooting for even further development. All right. Would anyone else like to share any experiences or stories as well around this these forms of power?
I can share if you like me to, Ignacio.
Yeah, sure. Please.
Okay. So because our group, we went on a very personal note, for and again, their stories are their own. For me, in reflecting on our discussion, a time that I felt powerless was when it was my first semester of grad school, and I had to undergo a major surgery, and it was the first of many to come. I had a 20-pound tumor in my body, and they had to do a vertical C-section and everything to remove it. In the process, I lost my left ovary and fallopian tube and everything. And the recovery process is something that they don't really talk about. They just talk about the surgery, and they were like, hey, 50% of survival, and like we don't know if you have cancer or not. And I was like, oh, okay. So I luckily finished all my projects and stuff like that that I was working on. Again, first semester of grad school, I was like, oh, and I thought studying would be my biggest issue. But um so I underwent the surgery, and luckily survived and cancer free, but they don't talk about the recovery process when you can't do anything. And I couldn't even lift up my cat, and couldn't lift anything above 10 pounds, couldn't really like bend over or like to pick anything up, like. And it was just from going super independent to just powerless and being bedridden and unable to even sit up to write uh for like my papers and stuff like that for grad school. um what really helped were my mom and my brother, who were like, hey, if you need anything, let me know, like, because I couldn't even do dishes. Like, so it was like I felt like not only powerless, but also like taking up space that like I couldn't really clean up or anything, and I couldn't really cook at all either. So it was just it was just like what helped me through it um were were just like my mom and my brother being there, but also my friends who were able to, hang out with me online, and they took time out of their day to even like stream movies and stuff like that through Discord. And so I was like, thank you. Like, so because those, like, it's easy to fall into that hole of powerlessness, um and truly your loved ones are like, whether they're chosen family or uh blood relatives, like those who are there for you like through your toughest times, that's like what made me feel powerful, like to be able to keep going.
Thank you, Kali. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing your story. And I want to kind of put this out there too. The another part that trying to share as well is that, right, we talked about this in the first training, when we were talking about like advocacy. What's the purpose of advocacy? When is advocacy needed? And a lot of times advocacy is needed when we are experiencing or we're going through that sense of powerlessness, right? Or when we are feeling powerless. But the point is that at no point is anyone fully without power, right? Because then it's in those times where we begin to have that pull on transformative power. So whether we are really pulling power from our family members, the people around us, with that power with, whether we are pulling on our own internal resilience and sort of valuing ourselves and our own purpose, that's power in. So the reason why we're putting this definition and these words out there is because it's a very good thing to educate young people that you're working with on these other forms of power as well, so that we can, right, expand the definition. Just like we were talking about, there are many different types of leaders, there's many sources of power, so that they can also identify when they are using that transformative power, when it is appropriate to pull on those different avenues of transformative power as well in those, right, those moments of conflict or challenges. Okay. All right. And I just want to sort of end this last part real quick with this quote too, and this is from the same speech, right? Because it's helpful to read the whole speech if you're pulling quotes. So from the same speech from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I felt this was so relevant to what we're talking about. And he goes on to say, and one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites, polar opposites, so that love is identified with a resignation of power and power with a denial of love. Again, just want that to sit. This whole point of talking about transformative power, it is alone, on its own, dismantling that definition of power over. And that's the whole point. That's what we're trying to do. To, in our spaces, when we're working with youth, we're creating spaces for youth, despite what the environment may be, when we are creating our own little community. In that community, we want to make it accessible and a practice to dismantle the power over by utilizing that transformative power and having this in mind, that, right, love and shared space, collectiveness can exist with the practice of power. Okay. So kind of to move forward, the place that we really need to begin before we start kind of creating those communities, creating those spaces where we are working with youth is, and we said this in the last session too, where we really need to start with that identifying part of identifying the harm that has been done to young people, how systems have harmed young people as well through, right, again, our social spaces, the laws that we have, the policies that we have, the culture that we may have with how we treat young people. And we want to, again, move into that restorative space. And that's what we're doing through this conversation right now. Transformative justice, that's a whole nother conversation where we're doing system change. We can still operate in that space, but right now in this space, we're really focusing on that. How do we create a space where community healing can take place, where we can build more trust in our spaces with young people? Because again, when we have that power over, that's building mistrust. So how can we reverse that? How can we have those policy changes with our agency, with our practices? And how can we provide a change of environment and provide those safe spaces as well? Right. So in that sense of acknowledging, we have to acknowledge that adultism, just like we talked about in the last session, is power over. That's what's taking place. If we're just calling it out. And simply put, that is because adultism is a form of oppression against youth and young adults. Okay, and just as a review, adultism is when we are allowing behaviors and attitudes to really act upon or impact young people without their consent. Again, that's power over. Right? And I'm just going to go through some of these examples if we're talking about how we've shown up in the space or what we see in our environment, right? So right off the bat, right, when we are seeing young people being excluded and discounted, when their voices and their experiences are sort of being sort of like, well, that does not count in this space, or that doesn't apply, that's not relevant to what we're doing right now. No, your experience is not relevant. What we're doing in that space is we are marginalizing young people and their voice. Okay, anytime that we are applying rules, and this is through our agency, also in our spaces, anytime that we're applying rules and we are having those rules applied to young people, but then the rules are not applying to us, and this can come even with our community agreements, right? When we have certain laws and rules around how youth are supposed to act in this space, the way that they're supposed to behave, the way that the process that they're supposed to take, we have to hold ourselves accountable in that space as well with the same rules. And when we are doing that, right, when we are only applying them to young people, what we're doing is we are othering young people. So we are really putting into practice of telling them that you do not belong in this space. Okay. The other thing is when we are acting in that constricting way, we are constricting the way that young people move, whether that is physically or through our words and how we create space. And we're saying you're not allowed to, express yourself in this way. You're not allowed to show that you're excited in that way. You're not allowed to move in the space the way that you are. You have to line up. You have to sit down. You need to look at me in order to listen and pay attention. That is a form of control. And that, again, is power over. And the last bit is when we are not really taking seriously the experiences that young people go through, when they are saying that they are having a hard time, that they are beyond their capacity energy wise, or that they cannot continue forward at this moment in time, and we kind of, well, you'll be fine, or if you just try harder, you'll get through this, or you're not really applying yourself fully, right? When we are doing that and we're having that approach, what we are showing is a lack of respect for young people, right? And a lot of these times, a way we can check this is, would you do this to another adult? Would you behave this way to another adult in the space, or someone that we consider our age appropriate, like peer? We should be treating young people as partners, equal partners. And I just want to put these out there as some examples, okay, of adultism, and we are practicing that power over versus power with. All right, so when we are utilizing transformative power, right, when the young people are able to have a voice in decision making, when we are treating them as equal partners, not only is it going to be able to impact our progression and be able to allow us to have a lot more capability to have community change in a positive manner, but even them individually and for the community, there are going to be some long lasting impacts. And that's the point. When we are practicing transformative power in this space, and young people are part of that, they're going to be able to take this throughout their life, and it's going to be able to help them to navigate further challenges and further conflicts that take place, because conflicts and challenges are inevitable. So when we are bringing transformative power into that space, we're helping to prepare them for their roles in life, and that's throughout generations. So as they become adults, right, and older elders or older roles within their community, that is still being applied, and that is applying to how they, again, treat young people in the space. So it is sustainable when we are taking these approaches. Thank you, Anna. Thanks for joining in. Okay, and just want to leave you with this, right? So the purpose and the message that we are trying to share. The purpose, what we're really trying to do is build that practice of spreading or putting into the space the practice of responsibility and accountability. And this means throughout our generational roles, okay? So that we all have that responsibility and accountability. And other than that, this is something that we can use this message to really promote this practice, especially with how we are bringing young people into our space, is that when we are developing the intergenerational trust, right? So from older ages to younger ages and in between, when we're talking about having youth mentors that are, again, being in that space and building trust for younger K through 6, et cetera, if you're working with high schoolers, what we're trying or what we are having as an impact is that we are building long-term resilience across the board, right? And across all identities. So it doesn't matter like what stage in life you are, what your the conditions you may be experiencing. This is always going to have more positive impacts, and it's always going to have some effect in mitigating a lot of the sort of harmful behaviors or risk-taking or sense of having lower self-esteem in one person's life. Okay, so that's really the base of this and the biggest impact long-term. Okay. Hey, so let's get into how we go about that. We talked about like why, we talked about the concepts. How do we do that? Right off the bat, the first thing that we need to consider is really how we hold space for youth in our partnerships, right? So creating more space and advocating for more youth adult partnerships. And when I say youth adult partnership, I'm not saying to where all the time we are 50-50. It's more understanding that and being okay with the flexibility of power. So we're having power with, but there might be times where the adults are leading in the segment because we have or adults may have more resources and more knowledge to pull from and skills, but they're sharing that space with youth to be a part of it every step of the way. Or there may be times where us as adults, we're taking time to learn from our young people, our youth partners, and they are leading the way because they are pulling from their experiences, their knowledge, their skills that they have. Okay, so that's really what a healthy youth adult partnership is all about, and it is, and I will say that word, it is a pluralistic approach. And at the base, when we are having those youth adult partnerships, at the base should be a youth-centered approach, where if we can just look at this diagram here, where we are kind of having all of these windows open, and we have these concepts where we are pulling in partners, we're pulling in family members, we're pulling in the passions of the youth and anyone else they want to bring into that space, so that we can, again, we can expand their possibilities, as in help them to network, bring in resources. We can have them have those people to where they can have trusted confidants, people that they can talk to when they're having challenges. And that includes us as adults in that space, where we can have people that are expanding their idea of what they think they are capable of, right? So really pushing that I guess that expanse, right? Or their vision of what they see as something that they can accomplish, right? So let's expand that a little bit. How we can provide support as well. And that's really just providing the skills. Who can we bring in to give them the skills necessary so that they can be successful? And sharing power, we've been talking about this the whole time. So really, who can we bring into this space to model that power with and be able to make it to where us as adults, we're not simply leading and making all the decisions, but we're sharing that decision-making process throughout the whole process, okay? And this can be applied in any environment and to any capacity with our spaces when we're working with young people. And lastly, just to kind of give that spectrum too, right? So with our programs, and I did say this, that youth-centered programs, that's the base. But we can go further and have youth-driven programs where youth and their voice are a constant part of directing our approach. So we are constantly having them a part of every step of our campaign, of our development of a program. And we're asking them, so how do you feel about this? What are some of your ideas? They're voicing, well, we kind of, we don't think that'll be relevant to young people, or we feel that that kind of might rub us the wrong way, or maybe here's another message that we can use. That's what youth-driven program looks like. And youth-led is where we are allowing young people to have complete control, make all the decisions. But what we're doing, say, okay, well, where do you need support? Okay, so it sounds like you want to create sort of an educational material to share with the rest of our partners in this community. Okay, what do we need for that? Here's a budget that we can work with. Is that enough? They can go back and forth. Yes, no, we might need to pull in some more resources. Okay, if we need more money, well, let's come up with an idea for how we can raise some other funds, etc. That is having a youth-led program where they are, again, not just leading the direction, but they're taking part in each of the actions as well. And that can be research, that can be the actual activities in the middle of the process, and that can also be the evaluation steps. And the reason why this is going to have the most outcome, the youth-led programs, is because they are acquiring those skills, and these skills that they're acquiring throughout this process is going to be something that they can take with them to their community, and again, through each of those generational roles in their life. All right, now we'll pass the baton. Now we're going to be talking about some tools that you can use to Calais.
Thank you, Ignacio. So today I'm going to be talking about the empowerment dynamic, which is also known as TED. It's also a book that you can look up, The Power of TED. And what this is basically the change, right? So we have, to start us off, it's the Cartman's drama triangle, which is the societal norm. So it's also known as the dreaded drama triangle, where you have this this very negative mindset. And so it's very anxiety based and problem focused. And it starts off with that victim mindset. So these triangles, they're actually parallel to each other, whereas like one, although being anxiety based and problem focused, the other one being passion based and outcome focused. So you have this one being more this victim mindset, where essentially the person's mindset is, poor me, I can't do anything. I that all that negative energy just compounding onto them, and they outwardly share that, like I can't do anything, I can't do this, I can't do that, there's nothing I can do, that's it, like there's all these problems but no solutions. And then you have the rescuer, who is going to be someone who's just like, yeah, you really can't do it, I'll take over, I'll fix it for you. And then you have the persecutor, where it's like bringing them down even more so. Yeah, like you really can't do it, you should just give up, all this negative energy, right? So then of course the opposite would be changing that mindset. So this is the change. Unfortunately, the dreaded trauma triangle is the societal norm, and the change is going to be hard because our brains are so like in love with scheduling. It loves the repetition of these, because that's your safe space. However, like changes is scary for our minds. And so something that we can do in parallel to this dreaded drama triangle is to be embracing the empowerment dynamic. So instead of the victim, you're the creator. You're someone who's just like, yes, I can do this. This is something that I can do. I do need to ask for help though, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to seek help and stuff. And then you have the coach and the challenger. Both are responsible for like encouraging that person, that youth, like, and saying that, yes, you can do this. Here are some resources. Here are some things. Or have you thought about this? What's your game plan? Like, okay, that's awesome. Like, how can we get you to succeed? Here are some resources. Here are some things to keep in mind. It's all that positive and encouragement. It's all about, this is what's put before me and I can achieve it, rather than this is what's put before me and you know what, I've been told I can't do it, so I can't do it. So it's all about changing that mindset and being all about the growth mindset towards, I can do this, and being supported. And that's us as like those who work with youth. We're there to help them and work with them, so that way they know that they can and will make change, and it just takes time. So it's all about that growth mindset and that change. And then one way of doing that is applying an equity and intersectional lens. So so going forward into these lenses, It's understanding that not everything is truly mainstream when we work with youth. It's good to keep in mind that not everything is truly mainstream. We do our best to provide equitable mainstream opportunities, but even though it's not always achieved, that effort is still there and that effort is still supported. And another thing to keep in mind is the need to build a baseline understanding, involve youth in the decision, and be vulnerable with the youth you work with too, because they will know when you're disingenuine. They will understand that because they have probably dealt with countless adults who like treated them negatively just for them being the age that they are, and that's something that they always keep in mind as well. And consider each individual's learning style. Make it known that everyone is different, and this includes their learning styles and also their teaching styles too. So if you ask somebody what their learning style is, for me, it's I'm very kinesthetic. I like feeling things. I'm very like I spatial, like I love things that are in person, things that I can touch and feel and just like mold or something. And that actually helps me learn better than just auditory learning or only visually learning. I like a combination of all the things, all the senses really help me learn. And then so understanding that also brings in like this knowing that everybody learns different, everyone is different, everyone's coming from a different background, and by doing so you're being equity based and not equality based. So keep both in mind in your approach when working with youth and working with others as well, and understanding that we still live in a time where some things just aren't equity based, because for even for myself being immunocompromised, it's like the world is still not as safe for me in person as it even before like early times of the pandemic. Um so keep in mind those things, and really like with those keep him with all of that being kept in mind, it's important to meet youth where they are. So what does that mean? So meeting youth where they are is going and using platforms that that they use. So it could be on Discord, it could be on Instagram, it could be on Google Meet, it could be on Slack, it could be here on Zoom. Whatever way is like best for them. Try and see like what's something that's as simple as them opening up an app they already have and connecting with them that way. So really have those conversations with them, again giving them that power, because they do have power, allowing them the opportunity to share in a safe space and a mutual space, and you share your personal self with them too, because they do understand, they will understand. And as long as you communicate that, and again communication is a lifelong it's just a lifelong workshop, to be honest. It's a lifelong journey to learn how to communicate, and as long as you're putting your best foot forward and you're expressing like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is the why, and this is how we're going to do it, but especially that why, because the purpose of things is really important to get through to the youth and express that. And with that being said, I'll hand it back over to Ignacio in regards to desired outcomes.
Thank you. All right. So this is what we're hoping, right? After this webinar session, right? We're hoping that the outcomes will be that we want you all, by using this knowledge and advocating for these practices, right, to normalize that trust and belief in young people, and the trust and belief in their capabilities, their ability to find solutions. Just like we were talking about the empowerment dynamic, or TED, right? That TED tool. The base of that is really allowing solutions to be intrinsic of young people, or to be base out from their own ideas, right? From their own perspectives, their own lens. And that, again, especially if we're going back to that power in, that's what we're trying to build on. But it's not going to be built, and young people aren't going to be able to really practice that and voice that if we don't make space for that. So that's what we're trying to normalize. We're also trying to denormalize in this, with this knowledge and these practices, the misperception and the distrust of young people, their agency, their values, especially with how they approach situations, they approach challenges. Sometimes that can be devalued and misunderstood. And also, we want denormalization, that misperception that young people aren't able to contribute or that they don't. But again, from last session, we provided so many accounts and case studies of how young people have been contributors to social justice change throughout our history in the past 100 years. Okay, there's probably a lot more examples, but we just gave a little snippet. And the last bit, we want to expand your ability to advocate for, because really a lot of what this is called is participatory action research, where we are including young people in every process. We're including young people in that action step of gathering information from their communities, doing that research themselves through their perspective, then coming up with a solution that they deem to be most appropriate, that's going to have the best impact for their community based on, again, their experiences with their community, their understanding of their community, and then also allow them or make space for them to be able to, again, provide those solutions, but also take a look at that process and evaluate the impacts later on as well. Okay, so seeing that whole window of campaign and policy change or system change. All right, it's so important to have them involved in every step. But I'll go ahead and read this little quote too, which is coming out of a document that we're pulling from as well. But it's so what we want to do is grant youth equal and fair opportunities to, one, be informed and consulted, and to also actively engage them in all phases of policy cycle and service design and delivery. Okay, so this is what we're advocating for. Not leaving them out, not only checking in when we feel, okay, we want a soundboard, but working to make more space for young people to be a part of every step. Okay, we'll kind of open up space for discussion. Any takeaways? I'd love to hear from you all, like how this is impacting you, your knowledge, maybe even your practice, going forward. But before I do that, I also want to pull from the facilitators. If there's anything that we want to add to the discussion that we haven't talked about previously, or that was missing in any of the slides, I open that up as well. All right, so I'm hearing from my facilitators that we are good. We said everything we need to. Everything was smooth. So for you all, I'd love to hear any of your takeaways, how you are accepting this information, and how you're processing some of this information as well. And don't mind me, I'm just leaving space and time in case anyone's typing in the chat. And if not, no worries, because this time is not forced. Okay.
I can share.
Yeah, sure.
Just that the whole concept of adultism is fairly new to me, even though I experienced it as a child, and I have seen it in my own interactions with my children now, but I just wasn't really cognizant of it before. And so you were the one that gave me the language for that to really identify it. And now I see it all the time, and I'm very aware of it and how it impacts us, how it impacted me well into adulthood, and how it impacts my kids and how I don't want it to impact them in negative ways. And so I'm very aware of that and more mindful now. And I really appreciate that. And it really was something that is so embedded in our culture and in our society that it's just so common, but that it doesn't have to be that way. And so I really appreciate the conversations on adultism that we've had.
I'd also like to add, though, too, that that when it comes to working with youth, definitely keep in mind that there are identities that are overlooked. Like there could be someone who is deaf, there can be someone who is blind, there could be someone who is not in a safe environment to be able to voice who they are, or even for me working at an LGBTQ center, sometimes we can't even send out mail to our youth, depending on how their family is with LGBTQ, and especially if they're not out with their family and everything. We have had it in the past where, like, just being mindful of who people are, and they will be able to, we're here to provide a safe space for as long as like we possibly can for the youth to be involved. And I think it's important to keep in mind that being that safe space also means you being mindful and understanding and responding with empathy in whatever the case happens, like whatever happens, and how the youth are sharing things with you. Know that when they do share, listen with intent and respond with empathy.
Thank you both for bringing into the space your experiences and your, I guess, yeah, your I guess acquisition of some of this knowledge as well. And I feel um and this is sometimes hard for us to be in a space for, because a lot of times we are putting in so much of this work and sometimes we don't see the outcome, especially, because there's so much happening from the youth's perspective and youth experience that we may not be privy to. But something that I really want to put into all of our hearts and our practice is, again, with that modeling of transformative power, of offering that trust in that space, knowing that the young people we're working with are putting forward their best intention as well. And not everyone is coming from the same space, the same sort of roots and everything, or experiences. So as we've been saying, and as Kale was saying just in the past couple slides, we really do need to put in that trust to meet them where they are at, to help get them to that understanding that the space that we are operating in is a safe space. That takes time. Sometimes takes a lot of time. But, and I can tell you this, there's plenty of studies out there that show that long-term, that continuous engagement, again, that intergenerational relationship and that building of trust, long-term wise, that's what's always going to have the most impact. We may not see it, but the young people are feeling it and they're taking it with them, whether they may say it, whether they may share those accolades and that praise or not. So we have to operate with that trust as well. But we see the outcomes in data. This is easy for us to share with our right agencies when we're advocating for it. But at this moment too, I'm also just speaking from experience, from testimonies, and just from the human experience as well. Okay. And leaving space, does anyone else have anything? Rachel, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same with Rubina, but for me, I've not heard that term. And then has been this entire time a definite reflection of, what am I doing with my youth? Because I had not, like I said, just making sure I'm attacking it in the right way. And then I think it's Kalal, sorry if I messed up your name. Her perspective too, from little things like mail, that's going to cause a problem at your house if your parents are not aware of what's going on. So, being gentle and mindful And like you said, it's a process. It's a long process. And but for me, this was total self-reflection today. So thank you. Like I said, I've not heard that term. And I've certainly not applied that to me. And there is a big generational difference when, age-wise, it's a different, it's a different conversation. Though you like to stay, relevant with the kids, it is very different experiences we've had growing up. Even in my group of 4, my my big thing was kickball, and I'm thinking, did they even play kickball still? So but no, it's been very, very enlightening in regards to something new, right? So thank you.
Appreciate that, Rachel. And that's the best thing to hear anytime. So I'm glad anytime I hear that, if this is something that is impacting and shifting the way that you're thinking, that fills my heart. So I appreciate that. All right. So if there are no more comments, no more things to be said, taking a breath. Okay, I'll go ahead and move forward to this next slide. And just like our last session, we really love leaving and really including some, poetry, readings, and beyond just data, because I don't okay. Anyways, we'll leave you with this, right? And we want you to kind of like sit with this sentiment as well. Right. So the one who plants trees, knowing that they will never sit in their shade, has at least started to understand the meaning of life. With that, thank you everyone for another wonderful session. Thank you for your discussions. Thank you for coming in this space. What is provided and created, but you all are making it. So just want to put that out there. And with that, I think we are ending session 2. See you all next time, session 3. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.